Oh yeah, number 3. When another night came, the columns changed to purple streaks. Uh, sorry. When another night came, the columns changed to purple streaks filed across 2 pontoon bridges. A glaring fire wine tinted the waters of the river. Its rays, shining upon the moving masses of troops, brought forth here and there suddenly gleams of silver or gold. Upon the other shore, a dark and mysterious range of hills was curved against the sky. The insect voices of the night sang solemnly. After this crossing, the youth assured himself that at any moment they might be suddenly and fearfully assaulted from the caves of the lowering woods. He kept his eyes watchfully upon the darkness, but his regiment went unmolested to a camping place, and his soldiers slept the brave sleep of wearied men. In the morning they were routed out with early energy, and hustled along a narrow road that led deep into the forest. It was during this rapid march that the regiment lost many of the marks of a new command. The men had begun to count the miles upon their fingers, and they grew tired. Sore feet and damn short rations, that's all, said the loud soldier. There was perspiration and grumblings. After a time they began to shed their knapsacks. Some tossed them unconcernedly down. Others hid them carefully, asserting their plans to return for them at some convenient time. Men extricated themselves from thick shirts. Presently few carried anything but their necessary clothing, blankets, haversacks, canteens, and arms and ammunition. You can now eat and shoot, said the tall soldier to the youth. That's all you want to do. There was sudden change from the ponderous infantry of theory to the light and speedy infantry of practice. The regiment, relieved of a certain burden, received a new impetus, but there was much loss of valuable knapsacks, and on the whole very good shirts. But the regiment was not yet veteran-like in appearance. Veteran regiments in the army were likely to be very small aggregations of men. Aggregations. Aggregations. Okay, so I'm gonna go back. The men had begun to count the miles upon their fingers. So they hit their knapsacks, right? Or not hit them, but they left their knapsacks. They shed their knapsacks. Some tossed them unconcernedly down, others hid them carefully. Men extricated themselves from thick shirts. Presently few carried anything but their necessary clothing, blankets, haversacks, canteens, arms, and ammunition. You can now eat and shoot, said the tall soldier to the youth. That's all you want to do. Okay, so they're kind of getting settled. There was sudden change from the ponderous infantry of theory to the light and speedy infantry of practice. The regiment, relieved of a burden, received a new impetus, but there was much loss of valuable knapsacks, and on the whole, very good shirts. But the regiment was not yet veteran-like in appearance. Veteran regiments in the army were likely to be very small aggregations of men. Once, when the command had first come to the field, some perambulating veterans, noting the length of their column, had accosted them thus: "Hey, Fowlers, what brigade is that?" And when the men had replied that they formed a regiment and not a brigade, the older soldiers had laughed and said, "Oh God." Also, there was too great a similarity in the hats. The hats of a regiment should properly represent the history of headgear for a period of years. And moreover, there were no letters of faded gold speaking from the colors. There were no letters of faded gold speaking from the colors. So they were new and beautiful, and the color bearer habitually oiled the pole. So I don't know what they're talking about. Presently, the army again sat down to think. The odor of the peaceful pines was in the men's nostrils. The sound of monotonous axe blows rang through the forest, and the insects, nodding upon their perches, crooned like old women. The youth returned to his theory of a blue demonstration. One great dawn, however, he was kicked in the leg by the tall soldier, and then, before he was entirely awake, he found himself running down a wood road in the midst of men who were panting from the first effects of speed. His canteen banged rhythmically upon his thigh, and his haversack bobbed softly. His musket bounced a trifle from his shoulder at each stride and made his cap feel uncertain upon his head. He could hear the men whisper jerky sentences. "Say, what's all this about? What thunder we skedaddling this way for? Billy, keep off 'em feet. You run like a cow," and the loud soldier's shrill voice could be heard. What the devil they in such a hurry for? The youth thought the damp fog of early morning moved from the rush of a great body of troops. From the distance came a sudden spatter of firing. He was bewildered. As he ran with his comrades, he strenuously tried to think, but all he knew was that if he fell down, those coming behind would tread upon him. All his faculties seemed to be needed to guide him over and past obstructions. All his faculties seemed to be needed to guide him over and past obstructions. He felt carried along by a mob. The sun spread disclosing rays, and one by one regiments burst into view like armed men just born of the earth. The youth perceived that the time had come. He was about to be measured. For a moment he felt in the face of his great trial like a babe, and the flesh over his heart seemed very thin. He seized time to look about him calculatingly, but he instantly saw that it would be impossible for him to escape from the regiment. It enclosed him, and there were iron claws of tradition and law on four sides. He was in a moving box. But he instantly saw that it would be impossible for him to escape from this regiment. It enclosed him, and there were iron claws of tradition and law on four sides. Iron claws of tradition and law on four sides. He was in a moving box. As he perceived this fact, it occurred to him that he had never wished to come to the war. He had not enlisted of his free will. He had been dragged by the merciless government, and now they were taking him out to be slaughtered. The regiment slid down a bank and wallowed across a little stream. The mournful current moved slowly on, and from the water, shaded black, some white bubble eyes looked at men. The regiment slid down a bank and wallowed across a little stream. The mournful current moved slowly on, and from the water, shaded black, some white bubble eyes looked at the men. Some white bubble eyes, big old eye. As they climbed the hill on the farthest side, artillery began to boom. Here the youth forgot many things as he felt a sudden impulse of curiosity. He scrambled up the bank with a speed that cannot be exceeded by a bloodthirsty man. He expected a battle scene. There were some little fields girded and squeezed by a forest. Some spread over the grass, and among the tree trunks he could see knots and waving lines of skirmishes. There were some little fields girded and squeezed by a forest, spread over the grass, and among the tree trunks he could see knots and waving lines of skirmishers who were running hither and thither and firing at the landscape. A dark battle line lay upon a sun-struck clearing that gleamed orange color. A flag fluttered. Other regiments floundered up the bank. There were some little fields girded and squeezed by a forest, spread over the grass, and among the tree trunks he could see knots and waving lines of skirmishers who were running hither and thither and firing at the landscape. He expected a battle scene. I'm getting lost, right? Hold on, sorry. There were some little fields girded and squeezed by a forest, spread over the grass, and among the tree trunks he could see knots and waving lines of skirmishers who were running hither and thither and firing at the landscape. A dark battle line lay upon a sun-struck clearing that gleamed orange color. A flag fluttered. Other regiments floundered up the bank. The brigade was formed in line of battle, and after a pause started slowly through the woods in the rear of the preceding skirmishers who were continually mounting into the scene to appear again farther on. They were always busy as bees, deeply absorbed in their little combats. The youth tried to observe everything. He did not use care to avoid trees and branches, and his forgotten feet were constantly knocking against stones or getting entangled in briars. He was aware that these battalions with their commotions were woven red and startling in the gentle fabric of softened greens and browns. It looked to be a wrong place for a battlefield. The skirmishers in advance fascinated him. Their shots in the thickets and at a distant and prominent tree spoke to him of tragedies hidden, mysterious, solemn. Once the line encountered the body of a dead soldier. He lay upon his back, staring at the sky. He was dressed in an awkward suit of yellowish brown. The youth could see that the soles of his shoes had been worn to the thinness of writing paper, and from a great rent in one, the dead foot projected piteously. And it was as if fate had betrayed the soldier. In death it exposed to his enemies that poverty which in life he had perhaps concealed from his friends. The ranks opened covertly to avoid the corpse. The invulnerable dead man forced away for himself. The ranks opened covertly to avoid the corpse. The invulnerable dead man forced away for himself. The youth looked keenly at the ashen face. The wind raised the tawny beard. It moved as if a hand were stroking it. He vaguely desired to walk around and around the body and stare. The impulse of the living to try to read in dead eyes the answer to the question. the impulse of the living to try to read in dead eyes the answer to the question. During the march, the ardor which the youth had acquired when out of view of the field rapidly faded to nothing. His curiosity was quite easily satisfied. If an intense scene had caught him with its wild swing as he came to the top of the bank, he might have gone roaring on. This advance upon nature was too calm. He had opportunity to reflect. He had time in which to wonder about himself and to attempt to probe his sensations. Absurd ideas took hold upon him. He thought that he did not relish the landscape. It threatened him. A coldness swept over his back, and it is true that his trousers felt to him that they were no fit for his legs at all. A house standing placidly in distant fields had to him an ominous look. The shadows of the woods were formidable. He was certain that in this vista there lurked A house standing placidly in the fields had to him an ominous look. The shadows of the woods were formidable. The shadows of the woods were formidable. He was certain that in this vista there lurked fierce-eyed hosts. The swift thought came to him that the generals did not know what they were about. It was all a trap. Suddenly those closed forests would bristle with rifle barrels. Suddenly those closed forests would bristle with rifle barrels. Iron-like brigades would appear in the rear. They were all going to be sacrificed. The generals were stupid. The enemy would presently swallow the whole command. He glared about him, expecting to see the stealthy approach of his death. He thought that he must break from the ranks and harangue his comrades. Harangu. No, not G-U. G-U-E. So it was G-U, but I didn't say E. I got caught. He thought that he must break from the ranks and harangue. Harangue his comrades. They must not all be killed like pigs, and he was sure it would come to pass unless they were informed of these dangers. They must not all be killed like pigs, and he was sure it would come to pass unless they were informed of these dangers. The generals were idiots to send them marching into a regular pen. There was but one pair of eyes in the corpse. He would step forth and make a speech. Shrill and passionate words came to his lips. The line, broken into moving fragments by the ground, went calmly on through fields and woods. The youth looked at the men nearest him and saw, for the most part, expressions of deep interest, as if they were investigating something that had fascinated them. One or two stepped with overvaliant airs, as if they were already plunged into war. Others walked as upon thin ice. The greater part of the untested men appeared quiet and absorbed. They were going to look at war, the red animal, war, the blood-swollen god, and they were deeply engrossed in this march. As he looked, the youth gripped his outcry at his throat. He saw that even if the men were tottering with fear, they would laugh at his warning. They would jeer him, and if practicable, pelt him with missiles. Admitting that he might be wrong, a frenzied declamation of the kind would turn him into a worm. He assumed then the demeanor of one who knows that he is doomed alone to unwritten responsibilities. He lagged with tragic glances at the sky. He was surprised presently by the young lieutenant of his company, who began heartily to beat him with the sword, calling out in a loud and insolent voice, "Come, young man, get up into ranks there. No skulking will do here." He mended his pace with suitable haste, and he hated the lieutenant, who had no appreciation of fine minds. He was a mere brute. After a time, the brigade was halted this is what he says is, he mended his pace, the youth says is, he mended his pace with suitable haste. He mended his pace with suitable haste. And he hated the lieutenant, who had no appreciation of fine minds. He was a mere brute. After a time, the brigade was halted into the cathedral light of a forest. The busy skirmishers were still popping. Through the aisles of the wood could be seen the floating smoke from the rifles. Sometimes it went up into the little balls, white and compact. Through the aisles of the wood could be seen floating smoke. So that's like their guns. You know, the guns back then when they would shoot, they had like a ball of smoke. During this halt, many men in the regiment began erecting tiny hills in front of them. They used stones, sticks, earth, and anything they thought might turn a bullet. Some built comparatively large ones, while others seemed content with little ones. This procedure caused a discussion among the men. Some wished to fight like duelists, believing it to be correct to stand erect and be, from their feet to their foreheads, their mark. They said they scorned the devices of the cautious. But the others scoffed in reply and pointed to the veterans on the ranks who were digging at the ground like terriers. In a short time, there were quite a brigade along the regimental fronts. Directly, however, they were ordered to withdraw from that place. In a short time, there was quite a barricade. Okay, yeah, because they were making a barricade. In a short time, there was quite a barricade along the regimental fronts. Directly, however, they were ordered to withdraw from that place. This astounded the youth. He forgot his stewing over the advance movement. Well then, like his thinking, what he was thinking before, is stewing, like his thoughts were stewing. This astounded the youth. He forgot his stewing over the advance movement. You know, the building the barricade, the barriers, and well then, what did they march us out here for? He demanded of the tall soldier. The latter, with calm faith, began a heavy explanation. Although he had been compelled to leave a little protection of stones and dirt to which he had devoted much care and skill. When the regiment was aligned in another position, each man's regard for his safety caused another line of small entrenchments. They ate their noon meal behind the third one. They were moved from this one also. They were marched from place to place with apparent aimlessness. They were moved from that location. When the regiment was aligned in another position, each man's regard for his safety caused another line of small entrenchments. They ate their noon meal behind the third one. They were moved from this one also. To that location, they were marched from place to place with apparent aimlessness. The youth had been taught that a man became another thing in a battle. He saw his salvation in such a change. Hence this waiting was an ordeal to him. He was in a fever of impatience. He considered that there was denoted a lack of purpose on the part of the generals. He began to complain to the tall soldier. "I can't stand this much longer," he cried. "I don't see what good it does to make us wear out our legs for nothing." He wished to return to camp, knowing that this affair was a blue demonstration, or else to go into a battle and discover that he had been a fool in his doubts, and was in truth a man of traditional courage. The strain of present circumstances he felt to be intolerable. The philosophical tall soldier measured a sandwich of cracker and pork and swallowed it in a nonchalant manner. "Oh, I suppose we must go reconnoitering? Oh, I suppose we must go reconnoitering around the county." Hold on. The philosophical tall soldier, because the kid asked him, the kid's saying, like, you know, why are we, he's getting fed up, what's going on? And the philosophical tall soldier measured a sandwich of cracker and pork and swallowed it in nonchalant manner. He swallowed it in nonchalant manner. He only had a sandwich, pretty much like a Lunchable. "Oh, I suppose we must go reconnoitering, reconnoitering, around the country, just to keep 'em from getting too close, or to develop 'em or something." "Huh?" said the loud soldier. "Well," cried the youth, still fidgeting, "I'd rather do anything most than go tramping round the country all day, doing no good to nobody and just tiring ourselves out." "So would I," said the loud soldier. "It ain't right. I tell you, if anybody with any sense was a running this army, it—" "Oh, shut up," roared the tall private. "You little fool, you little damn cuss. You ain't had that there coat and them pants on for 6 months, and yet you talk as if—" "Well, I want to do some fighting anyway," interrupted the other. "I didn't come here to walk. I could have walked home, round and around the barn, if I just wanted to walk." The tall one, red-faced, swallowed another sandwich as if taking poison in despair. But gradually, as he chewed, his face became again quiet and contented. He could not rage in fierce argument in the presence of such sandwiches. During his meals, he always wore an air of blissful contemplation of the food he had swallowed. His spirit seemed then to be communing with the viands, viands, like he's communing, he's sitting down eating with the viands. I don't know if that's some sort of like another word for like something important, or I don't know. He accepted new environment and circumstance with great coolness, eating from his haversack at every opportunity. On the march he went along with the stride of a hunter, objecting to neither gait nor distance, G-A-I-T, nor distance. And he had not raised his voice when he had been ordered away from 3 little protected piles of earth and stone. And he had not raised his voice when he had been ordered away from 3 little protected piles of earth and stone, each of which had been an engineering feat worthy of being made sacred to the name of his grandmother. In the afternoon, the regiment went out over the same ground it had taken in the morning. The landscape then ceased to threaten the youth. He had been close to and become familiar with it. When, however, they began to pass into a region, his old fears of stupidity and incompetence reassailed him, but this time he doggedly let them babble. He was occupied with this problem, and in his desperation he concluded that the stupidity did not greatly matter. Once he thought he had concluded that it would be better to get killed directly and end his troubles. Regarding this, out of the corner of his eye, he conceived it to be nothing but rest, and he was filled with momentary astonishment that he should have made an extraordinary commotion over the mere matter of getting killed. He would die. He would go to some place where he would be understood. It was useless to expect appreciation of his profound and fine senses from such men as the lieutenant. He must look to the grave for comprehension. The skirmish fire increased to a long clattering sound. With it was mingled faraway cheering, and battery spoke. Directly the youth could see the skirmishers running. They were pursued by the sound of musketry fire. After a time, the hot, dangerous flashes of the rifles were visible. Directly the youth could see the skirmishers running. They were pursued. Okay, the skirmish fire increased to a long clattering sound. With it was mingled away faraway cheering, and battery spoke. Okay, directly the youth could see the skirmishers running. They were pursued by the sound of musketry fire. After a time, the hot, dangerous flashes of the rifles. Okay, after a time, the hot, dangerous. After a time, the hot, dangerous flashes of the rifles were visible. Smoke clouds went slowly and insolently across the fields like observant phantoms. The din became crescendo, like the roar of an over. Okay. Some clouds went slowly and instantly across the fields like observant phantoms. The din became crescendo, like the roar of an oncoming train. A brigade ahead of them and on the right went into action with a rending roar. It was as if it had exploded, and thereafter it lay. It was as if it had exploded, and thereafter it lay stretched in the distance behind a long gray wall, that one was obliged to look twice as to make sure that it was smoke. The youth, forgetting his neat plan of getting killed, gazed spellbound. His eyes grew wide and busy with the action of the scene. His mouth was a little ways open. His eyes grew wide and busy with the action of the scene. His mouth was a little ways open. Of a sudden, he felt a heavy and sad hand laid upon his shoulder. Awakening from his trance of observation, he turned and beheld the loud soldier. "It's my first and last battle, old boy," said the latter with intense gloom. He was quite pale, and his girlish lip was trembling. Eh? Murmured the youth in great astonishment. "It's my first and last battle, old boy," continued the loud soldier. "Something tells me." "What?" I'm a gone coon this first time, and I want you to take these here things to my folks." He ended in a quavering sob of pity for himself. He handed the youth a little packet done up in yellow envelope. "Why, what the devil," began the youth again, but the other gave him a glance as from the depths of a tomb, and raised his limp hand in a prophetic manner and turned away. All right, that was the end of chapter 3. Sorry guys, I was stuck at a lot of that. Peace, y'all.